Good evening. I'm Star Thinker Randy Pischel. I'm going to do something tonight I've never done before, and that's do a rebuttal. So let me explain. I'm at work, and you can see I'm in my lab. I work alone at night, and I have to leave. Well, I don't have to, but I leave around 9 o'clock. So I'm watching the live chat tonight, and the live chat is on the Hint of Riches channel, and it's done by K-Pro and Kyle Lazars. I really like these live chats as they're kind of interesting. Sometimes I'll put in my wisecrack remarks into the chat. And then I'm getting ready for work at that time, and it starts at 8, and I usually leave around 9. So and chat was not, or the live feed was not done yet at 9 o'clock. But just before I left, while I was getting ready, something was said, and I was like, oh, I got to respond to that, but I got to leave. And so I kind of rushed to work, and I got here, and it was too late. They were already done with their live feed. So I'm going to do this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something that was said. And it's funny because, this is lighthearted for me. Please don't take me seriously. I'm just doing this because, it's fun for me. And I'm not being serious in any way, so don't think I'm being serious and I'm doing a serious rebuttal and I'm yelling at this person. No, it's nothing like that. This has kind of been fun, and I don't know them very well, but they seem like fun people, and I'm sure they'll laugh about this. But the remark was made that there's no such thing as a poem purist. And I've always said in all my videos that all you need to solve this is the poem, and I still firmly believe that. So you could probably call me a poem purist. So, and then K-Pro said something along the lines, well, how come you're not searching in Canada or Nevada or California? And I got to tell you, way back when, people were searching in Canada and California. And I'm, one of my first solves was in California. My second solve was somewhere in Nevada. I toyed with the idea of Canada. I looked at Oregon and Washington. And all I had was the poem. That's all I was going off of was the poem. And then, of course, other things took precedence in my life, and I stopped following this. And then I recently picked it up because, because of reasons. But anyway, I was still going by the concept that the poem has the clues in it to find this treasure, and I firmly believe that. And yes, if you follow it, you probably will start. If you were in isolation and you didn't have the internet and you didn't have the benefit of watching people discuss this or seeing Forrest Fenn interviews or reading his books or anything like that, I still believe you can just take the poem and solve this. And I don't know why that is a bad thing. Now, I've always said that the poem contains clues and everything else is hints. That's how I prefer to think of it. You can also think of it that the poem is the cake and everything else is icing. Now, we have a little store here that has a bakery in it, and I'm diabetic, so I can't do this anymore, but it probably contributed to my diabetes. But I love to eat cake, and I would go buy a cake, but sometimes the icing on the cake is so thick you gotta scrape some of it off, and it just feels like a waste because that's like a great part of the cake is the icing. And you don't want to scrape it off, but too much icing ruins the cake. And so there's all these discussions, and of course part of the all the discussions, all the hints and stuff are the icing, but some of it I think is too much. And there's people out there who claim they've solved it, and people out there who are giving their opinions. And again, this is just my opinion. All my videos are just my opinion, so don't take anything as fact. But what was the point I was making? I'm sorry, I just got to work. But all that's too much icing. That's like too much out there. And now the thing is, I will eat cake with icing on it. I'm not saying don't use the hints. I'm saying if you were in isolation and had just the poem, you could find the treasure. Now, I have talked about I've had solves that I've discarded because of things I've learned since the poem came out. So um, I think the point, and when K-Pro said that, she said something like, I know who you are, or something like that, and I just felt like she was pointing right at me, because just prior to that in the chat I posted, all you need is the poem. And so I'm like, no, wait, that's not my point. My point is, you can solve this with just the poem, and I still believe that. So, like, when I'm watching Forrest Fenn interviews, and I believe hints should be taken with a grain of salt. I don't think hints should be taken as gospel. And even like Forrest Fenn interviews and his books and everything else, I don't think these should be taken as gospel clues to where the treasure is. They should be taken as, with a grain of salt, hints to solving the clues to where the treasure is. And there's a little bit of a difference there. But yeah, I've changed things, because now things like it had to be above 5,000 feet, or you had to be in a parking lot. I believe this, you would have done that anyway had you solved the poem. So I don't think those hints, while yeah, they're great to have, especially if you're a newbie or you're just getting into this or you're discussing it with someone else. Yeah, they're great to have. But, knowing that he went to a parking lot and went twice to where the treasure was, I don't think that's really important. As far as, you didn't need that information. You could have done without that information and still solved it. Knowing that information, yeah, you might eliminate a few places, but I don't think it's going to lead you to a few places. I mean, to me, that's my thought anyway. All these, when I watch an interview and I'm thinking, okay, so that eliminates this. So, my process is process of elimination. They were discussing tonight about, the 500 feet and the 200 feet and how that applies to the put in and stuff. And, that's stuff that I was thinking anyway. Because, when I was in the Michael Stather hunt, and that was the treasure trove, and I talked to Michael Stather after that, and he said, yeah, he just drove into a park. He went out, he found a spot, he threw the token in, and then he took a picture of the tree, he took the GPS coordinates, he took a map of the park, and later on he fit all that into a story. And I believe this is something, and again, it's a hint, I'm taking it with a grain of salt, but he said, I've had this spot thought out for a long, long time, and I was going to make it work no matter what. But I still think it's a place where he went out and, he parked in a parking lot and walked over to a spot and said, I don't think anyone will find it here, and plopped it down. Whether he had the exact spot thought out, I mean, again, this is part of the scraping away the icing, or the grain of salt. Whether he had the exact spot thought of, I don't know. I think that's open for debate. But whether he had like the park thought of, yeah, he might have thought of that his whole life. He might have had a spot where, there's places where I love to go. There's a place in Pikes Forest. It's under the Gilly Hall Mountain. I parked there, and it's kind of on a hill, but then there's higher mountains around it. And it's a beautiful spot, because when the sun's going down, it comes in between these two mountains and lights up this other mountain. And I mean, I know this spot intimately. I know everything about this spot. And I've taken hundreds of photos, and there's, over the course of 4 years, every time I take a photo, I'll compare the two photos to see if there was a landslide or anything else. I love that spot. And if I was going to do a treasure hunt, I would be like, hey, why don't I go put something in this spot? But I wouldn't have the exact location. I'd probably have to go there and look around and go, where would be a good place to put a little treasure chest? Maybe I should walk over here and down this ravine and behind this tree, and now here's a big rock, and oh, look, this is a perfect spot. So I might have had the park thought of, or the area thought of, but not the exact spot. And I think, this is probably what he did. And again, these are hints to be taken with a grain of salt. My discussion is to be taken with a grain of salt. When I watch these live streams and stuff, I love them, but I take them with a grain of salt. And I still think that, if I didn't have these, if I stayed off the internet, if I just had a copy of the poem printed on a piece of paper, even without the map, I know like he printed the poem on the map after the, there was some people got hurt and stuff. But I still think you could just take that poem and just through studying it, maybe visiting a few spots, you would start to narrow it down. And yeah, you would narrow it down to, hey, I just happen to be above 5,000 feet. Hey, I just happen to be in a parking lot. I just happen to be in a park. I don't know if this makes me not a purist, but I think, yeah, use the hints. And I've said that before. I've said this was my solve, but I changed it because of this hint. Use them. I'm not saying don't use them. I'm not saying only use the poem and don't use any of the hints, because you'd be crazy not to. That's not a thing. But yeah, I do believe you can use just the poem and solve this. But yeah, I'm also not stupid. I'm not going to not listen to what other people are saying. But anyway, that was my rebuttal. I will say I've always used the analogy of the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because they had a map and they didn't know where the starting point was. But their map was kind of more specific. If they had Google Maps, they probably could have figured it out. But then Mike said something tonight, and I said, oh, that's a better thing. He said, what if you had a treasure hunt and it just said, and you went out and you hit a treasure and you said, start in the park. And of course, that is so vague. There's millions of parks in America. Let's say you said, start in the park, go to the picnic table, go to the nearest tree to the picnic table, and then go to the second tree to that, and that's where you'll find the treasure. Let's say you had clues thought out like that. I think that's a better analogy, because probably 99% of all the parks in the state, in, the area has picnic tables. And if you have a picnic table, there's going to be a tree that's closest to that picnic table. And then somewhere there's going to be a tree that's closest to that tree. So how does that help you, knowing that, hey, maybe in the part of a discussion, someone said, hey, the picnic table was brown as opposed to green, and then everyone's discussing the colors, and, oh, this tree was 10 feet away as opposed to 200 feet away. And that's okay to know. But all this is just conjecture unless you know the park. So yeah, you can discuss it, you can get ideas, and you can think of things, but unless you know where that park is, which is where warm waters halt, the rest of it doesn't make sense. And I'm going to reiterate what I said the last time, was I'm agreeing with a Gypsy's Kiss, which is Toby, and again, I'm still learning names, where he said that the poem was written for one person, and that was Forrest Fenn. And I was thinking tonight on the way into work, he said he worked on this poem a long time and worked on nouns. And in my last video, I talked about the old newspaper games. But I'm wondering if there is ciphers. Now, I know, use the wheel was found by sliding the poem lines back and forth. Use the wheel, that kind of fit into the solve I had, because the solve I have kind of starts where warm waters halt. There's a giant wheel. So like everything I'm thinking about my solve, I'm like, that hint fit my solve, and I still use just the poem to solve it. And so I'm thinking, oh yeah, there's a giant wheel by, by where my solve is. So that's always interesting. And I found that I would never have found that looking at maps. But I went on Google Maps on the Street View, and of course, I don't know if Street View existed when he hid the treasure, so that might have been something he didn't consider. But on the Street View, I kind of thought, well, if this is where I'm starting, and I was just scrolling around the Street View, I was like, oh, look, there's a giant wheel. And I was laughing because I'm like, oh, man, I don't know if I should tell this to Mike or not. But anyway, I'm wondering now if he was so careful with the poem, if there is some kind of cipher in the poem. And he kept talking about using nouns and how he researched the nouns. And I was thinking about my own book, where, like, if I'm doing a cipher, I have to say, okay, I need a 7-letter word, and the 4th letter has to be a G, and the word has to mean this, and it has to fit in this sentence in order for this whole cipher to work. And yeah, I would pore over dictionaries and stuff and thinking, okay, what about this word? What about this word? If I use this word, I can change the word before and after it. And then, that would have ramifications. And so, yeah, it took me a long time to write my poem. And not my poem, my book. But yeah, I could see if he's taking that long, maybe there is something else in there. Maybe he had a cipher. What was it? Not start with the wheel, but use the wheel. Was that it? I can't remember. But use the wheel, start the wheel. I can't remember what the solve was now. But anyway, the wheel. And that was encoded in there. And if you are out to where you're putting boots in the ground, you might say, oh, gosh darn, there's a wheel right there. I must be on the right track. And, that's just something to consider. But yeah, that's a hint. That's icing on the cake. And if I didn't know, well, that's part of the poem, though, so I don't know. That could still be part of the poem purist. But if I park someplace, I'm not considering, this must be where Forrest Fenn parked. That's, to me, that might be nice to know, and I might think, yeah, I could see him parking here and walking in this direction. But yeah, I think it's an area, and he went to the area that he loved a lot. Again, this is conjecture and taken with a hint of salt and icing and all that good stuff. But like I said, he went there and he said, now this is my favorite area. Now where can I hide something? And he probably, blaze is where you mark a trail. And now whether he made the mark or whether there was already a mark there of some sort, I don't know. I would almost think that maybe he did the mark to blaze the trail, because once you find the blaze, he says, I don't have the poem in front of me, but look quickly down. So there's some kind of mark where you look down, and but again, these are the small details. You got to find the park. And using that analogy, you got city parks, you got county parks, you got state parks, national parks. How would you begin to find the park unless there's some kind of hint or something that points to that? And I believe that whatever points to that is in the poem. And so I do believe the poem needs more scrutiny. And I know one of the live streams coming up, and if you don't subscribe, or at least go look at Hannah Rich's channels and Kyle Lazar's channels, and he has web pages and forums and all that good stuff. But yeah, one of his discussions, he says, like the next one or the one after that or whatever, is going to be just, here's the poem, let's talk about the poem. And I think that is a discussion to have, and that is one I would like to, I might come in to work like an hour early so I don't have to leave in the middle of it, and just so I can see that one, because that would be the one that interests me, because I do think if you had the poem, regardless of what the hints are, you could find it. And so that's my kind of rebuttal and some my discussion on what I saw tonight. So I'm agreeing, and like I said way back, I'm using the jelly bean theorem. So I've been watching a lot of videos, and whenever I agree with somebody, I'm like, I make a note of that. Okay, I agreed with this person, and there's a lot of people that I'm like, oh, they're way off base. I'll make a note of that. But then I'll do some research. I'll do some Googling. I'll say, okay, this person's, what he talked about has 500 hits, and what this person talked about had 100 hits. So 500 people had the same idea, and 200 people had the same idea. I'm kind of going to go with the one where 500 people had the same idea. And that's kind of the logic I'm applying to this. So, no, that's not part of the poem. But again, if I didn't have the internet, I wouldn't be doing that. I would just be looking at the poem. So yeah, that's my rebuttal. It's kind of like true with caveats. It's like, yeah, take the hints, but I still think if you had just the poem, you could solve it. So that's my rebuttal. And again, this is in good fun. I don't truly believe I will ever find Forrest Fenn's gold. I may put boots on the ground at some point, but that would be for fun. It would be because I had vacation time and I needed some place to go. And it would be just a fun experience to go out and say, hey, I looked for this. But yeah, this isn't fun, so I hope no one takes me seriously. But yeah, when she looked at the camera and said, yeah, they know who they are. And I'm like, oh, she was talking right to me. She might not have been, because there's other poem poetry out there, but I was just like, oh. And, I had my remote in my hand. I was getting ready to turn off the monitor, and I was like, oh, I got to leave, though. I can't, I was going to go into the chat and, maybe get the phone number or something, but no, I just didn't have time. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I didn't want this to be too long, but find the park. There was discussion tonight about, where warm waters halt is a lot closer to the rest. Where warm waters halt, take it into Canyon Down. There's discussion that maybe there's a T intersection. You can go up or down, but you got to go down. And maybe down won't make sense until you're there looking at it. So if you're looking at Google Maps, maybe down doesn't make sense. Take it into Canyon. They were saying this is all closer together than some people. Way back when the poem first came out, people were like, where waters halt and take it into Canyon Down. That was spread out. Like I said, some people were talking about the Colorado River starts in Colorado and goes all the way, to the Gulf of Baja or whatever it is. And, so it wasn't within 500 feet. It was like within 1,000 miles. So yeah, people have been narrowing it down. And I think it's going to be interesting. I think when someone finds it, everyone's going to like face palm and go, oh, that was way easier. And that's funny. I'm going to say this in closing. Way back when, and this just occurred to me, maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but I remember when I first saw this, and when he first put the poem out, it was like in the news a lot, he had publicity. But when this first happened, I remember my first thought was, this will either be solved quickly, or it may go on for decades. And with the caveat that if it goes on and on, he's going to give so many hints that that's going to solve it. And I think that's partially true. It didn't get solved quickly, and it's gone on for a decade now. The poem was either really, really easy, or it was blindingly hard, and it turned out to be the second one. And I think that's one of the reasons I dropped off back when this started out, was I just thought this is just going to be solved really quickly. And but that's just a thought. When I was driving into work, I was like, am I remembering that right? Did I think that? And I thought, well, I'm thinking that now, but I think I thought that back then. So, but anyway, I'm Star Thinker. I'm doing this for fun. I wrote my book for fun. I did write my book because I wanted people to get out and see monuments and have boots on the ground and to have fun. I've really taken a bath on this. I'm not making any money on my book. But I did it not to make money. I did it because I wanted people to go out and experience these things. And when I found the snail with my son, that was great. I mean, I can't describe the feeling of that. And it's like I wanted other people to have that experience. And that's why I never advertised my book. I wasn't going to get publicity and try to sell as many copies as possible. I just wanted this to come out. I wanted, people to talk about it and to come together. I've met one of my best friends working on a treasure trove, and we're still in touch all these years later. In fact, there's a couple people that I'm still in touch with all these years later that I would have never met had I not done the treasure trove. So, yeah, it's just great fun. I wanted to have that experience, and it's something I've wanted ever since, going all the way back to like the Masquerade. To me, that was like my life goal, was to write a Masquerade book. But anyway, I'm going to sign off. I'm still a little bit early, so technically I'm not on the clock yet. But I'm sitting here. I've got emails to answer and work to do. And you all take care of this. We'll Star Thinker. If you go on Amazon, look for Randy Pischel. I got other books out there, and it's. I would like to get 3 Men in the Tub to start having some sales. So I love that story. Anyway, gotta go. You guys take care of yourself.